do you have a conversation about politics? We know we're having a lot of them and we need to be having them, but so often we're not having them very well. Well, I want to give you a couple of ideas about how you can have a conversation about politics. First, make sure you actually want to have a conversation. Too often what we want to have is a debate or an argument about politics, and that's what we end up having. So you got to get really clear on, I want to have a conversation. And what do I mean by that? In a conversation, the goal is to learn. It's to listen, to learn, and to share for both parties, right? So if I'm not coming into that conversation really wanting to learn where you're coming from, what you think, what brought you to that conclusion, why you feel the way you do, then the chances are I'm gonna end up having an argument or a debate with you. So I need to come into that conversation wanting to have a conversation. And here's a cue that's worked really well for me that helps me understand when I'm moving out of the goal of having a conversation and into the goal of having an argument. It's when I start to get angry. I start listening to you with an intent to learn and to understand, and I can feel myself starting to get angry. Now, why is that a cue? Because guess what? I have never gotten angry when I'm learning something. I go to school, I don't get angry. I read a book, I don't get angry, right? I'm not getting angry when my goal is to learn and to understand. I start to get angry when my goal is to push back, to disagree, to argue, to say, that's wrong. Right? So if you start to get angry, check yourself and say, wait a second, I think my motive in this conversation is changing. I'm starting to feel like I need to point out to you how you're wrong, not try and understand where you're coming from. Okay, so that's the first big idea. Make sure that you're ready to have a conversation. Now, just because I say, hey, don't get angry, it doesn't mean you can't disagree with what the other person is saying, because absolutely that's part of a conversation. And what I've found is so helpful, especially intense, high-stakes conversations about politics that can get really emotional, it's helpful to have a couple of ways to disagree without being disagreeable. A couple of scripts or phrases that I tend to use. Someone says something, oh, that's interesting. I have a different perspective on that. Period. I see that differently. Period. My experience has led me to a different conclusion about that. Period. I'm not trying to argue, and I'm not yet trying to convince you that I'm right. I'm just saying I see it differently. Those phrases are a very neutral way to tell you that I don't agree with what you're saying, but I'm not pushing back on it. I see that differently. I have a different perspective. Okay, so that's the first part, what I bring. But now, and I know what you're thinking, you're saying, yeah, but that other person doesn't want to hear what I have to say, and my meaning is valuable. Amen, it is. Part of that conversation is not just listening, it's also sharing. So how do I get my meaning across? How do I help that other person get to that frame of, we're having a conversation? Ask. Right? Get to the point where you say in the conversation, that's really interesting. I have a different perspective. Would you be willing to listen to that? Now that's a tough question, right? Would you be willing to listen to that? Because it says yes or no. There's only two answers there. Most people are gonna say yes because it seems like socially awkward and rude to say no. But if they do say no, great, you're done with that conversation. It's over, because a conversation involves two people, and if the other person doesn't wanna converse, you're done. But say they say yes and they really do listen. Hooray, you've got a conversation. More likely, and I know this is what you're thinking because we've all been in that conversation, they say, well, yeah, okay, I'll listen. And they start to listen with an intent to tell you how you're wrong, with an intent to tell you why they're right and how you're wrong. That's okay, you're prepared for that too. When they start to do that, just stop, watch the process and say, you know, I wanted to share with you where I was coming from. I feel like you're listening with an intent to disprove me or tell me why I'm wrong. If that's your intent, that's fine, but we're not really having a conversation. Would you be interested in trying to understand where I'm coming from? Just throw it right back at them. Invite them to listen. Invite them to learn from you. Again, you can't control whether they're gonna say yes or no. If they say no, that's fine, your conversation's over. But if they say yes, something magical might happen. You might actually be able to have a conversation as a free flow of ideas. And that's what we need right now, more than anything. Thanks for watching. Visit cruciallearning.com/saythat for more tips and resources for how to speak up when it matters most.